My daughter said, "You're too old to matter." She gave my room to her in-laws. So I gave my $28.00 estate to someone she hates. I remember exactly when it happened. My hands still tremble at the memory. I was in the kitchen, early afternoon light pooling on the worn wooden floorboards. I had just finished washing the teacups for the party upstairs, cups I had polished carefully, imagining the guests might pause to admire them. Then, thud, a sound I will never forget. I turned, and there it was, my shoes. My beloved shoes. The pair I'd crafted myself from supple olive green suede and soft, arch-supporting insoles, stained lightly with the scent of leather and midnight oil. I had worked on them for weeks to make them just right for her. Her favorite childhood style, the way her little feet used to dangle off the edge of the front porch when she was 9, and now, discarded, thrown with contempt into the trash bin right at the foot of the kitchen counter. Then I heard her voice, sharp, cold, dripping with disdain. "Shoes? Again?" Her eyes flicked up at me. "Don't you see how outdated and ugly they are? Do you think I need this peasant trash?" Laughter bubbled in the air behind me. The guests, my daughter's friends, her partners, the kind who snack on kale smoothies and talk branding, smirked and exchanged glances. I felt my breath hitch. My heart lodged in my throat. But I stood still. I had nothing to say. What could I say? Halfway into the room's silence, I heard a soft click somewhere beneath the kitchen table. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far beyond the basement. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. Still she continued, her voice rising, cruel. Do you think I am missing those hideous things? Those clunky, backward, tacky relics? Why do you keep doing this, Mother? Do you think I need your nostalgia decorating the place? We are not that kind of family. I watched the shoes, crumpled in their garbage fate. I watched her, my child, the one I carried for 9 months, taught to walk, taught to speak, called my work relics of poverty. I felt every broken stitch in my heart. I thought, let them all laugh. Let them believe I am passé, worthless, obsolete, because at that moment, I remembered something they did not know. I am still the one who saved her toes from splinters when she ran barefoot in the yard. I am still the one who measured each curve of her feet, day after day, so I could make shoes that fit perfectly. I am still the one who worked through nights so she could step forward into life with comfort and dignity. The room fell quiet again. Then she added with soft precision, "Don't think you can show up here again with your sentimental trash. This is the world now, and you are not part of it." And then she turned away, as if she had just delivered a finishing note on a performance. I heard the guests shuffle, excuse themselves, ascend to the lofty banquet room above, all of them so ready to follow the bright lights and ignore the quiet destruction below. I stood there until they were gone. Then I crossed the room, my legs carrying me toward the old wooden box hidden beneath my bedside. My breath was slow, steady, my tears long dried by necessity. I knelt and lifted the lid. A familiar creak echoed in the emptiness. Inside lay faded yellowed paper, sealed in a clear cover, the patent documents my hands design. The 2-page technical drawing, the descriptions, the official date stamped 1996. I never imagined she'd read it, or the law would acknowledge me, but there it was, still valid, untouched. I traced the lines with a trembling finger. Grace. My name. On the patent. My design. Hand-stitched, arch-cushioned, leather-bound creation, still legally mine. I closed the box and pressed it close to my chest. I would not cry. Not yet. But that document would speak when I could not. I stood up, my back straighter than it had been in years. I folded the disdained shoes, now worse for wear, and gently placed them back into the top of the box. Then I added the patent papers on top like a final shroud. I walked from the kitchen, the click of my steps echoing on the wood, all the way until the basement door. As I turned to go down into the shadowed corridors, I whispered to no one, I am still here. When I was younger, my hands never stopped moving. They call it slow work now, artisanal even, but back then it was just the way I survived. I stitched shoes by hand, one pair at a time, in the back of a cracked cement garage off Blossom Hill Road in San Jose. No machines, just scissors, thread, and leather so thick you needed to soak it in warm water before you could even convince a needle to listen. I did not come from wealth. My mother taught me how to stitch soles before I could recite multiplication tables. It was not glamorous, but it was honest. We made shoes for people who could not afford new ones. Shoes for construction workers, nannies, children who outgrew them faster than we could earn for more. We patched more than we created, but even patches could carry pride if done right. When my daughter was born, my hands didn't stop working. They just shifted purpose. I made her first pair of baby booties from the softest felt I had, blue with white stitching. She kicked them off every time I tried to photograph her, and I would laugh, catching the moment just before the little shoes hit the floor. When she started walking, I made her real shoes. Proper soles, cushioned support, careful lacing. No neon plastics or cartoon prints like the others wore. Just durable, beautiful leather, hand-shaped to fit her growing feet. Each year I'd trace her soles on paper, add a centimeter for growth, and design the next pair accordingly. She used to sit beside me on the floor of the workshop, watching every move, every puncture of the awl. "Mommy," she'd whisper, "you're a magician." I would kiss her forehead and tell her, "A magician with glue on her hands, maybe." She smiled once and said, "When I grow up, I'll make sure you never have to work again." I believed her. She believed in herself, too. Until middle school came, that was when the whispering started. I noticed her hesitation when I picked her up after school. She no longer waved when she saw me. She stayed in the corner when her classmates came over. And the shoes? The shoes I made with love and care, those started disappearing. One afternoon I found a pair under her bed, shoved behind a stack of fashion magazines. The insoles were scuffed, the heel barely worn. When I asked why she wasn't wearing them, she shrugged. "They don't match anything I have." I made her another pair, more neutral, softer tones. She accepted them with a half smile, but never wore them. I did not push. I only realized the full truth on a rainy Tuesday in 8th grade. She had left school early for a group project, and I decided to drop off her forgotten lunch in person. I walked across the campus to the side door of the art building, and that's when I heard her. She was standing with 3 other girls, all wearing bright brand-name sneakers and straight ponytails. My daughter held one of my shoes in her hand, the tan leather Mary Janes I had made just 2 weeks ago. She held it up like it was roadkill. "It smells like old people," she said, pinching her nose. "Seriously. My mom made it. She works in this creepy old shoe garage. It's disgusting," the girls giggled. One said, "Wait, she makes your shoes?" Another chimed in, "What is this, the 1800S?" And then my daughter dropped the shoe into the outdoor trash can. Ugh. She calls it handmade. I call it poverty perfume. My legs froze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I stepped back before they saw me. I walked the long way home, in the rain, without delivering lunch. That night when she came home, she hugged me loosely and said she was tired. I didn't mention the shoes. I didn't mention the trash can. I simply placed a napkin over her untouched lunch and tucked it in the fridge for later. The next morning I opened the studio and stared at my workbench. I touched each tool like it had betrayed me. I remember wondering, how could something made with so much love be turned into something so shameful? After that day, she stopped asking for shoes. I stopped offering. She began buying her own cheap flats from the mall at first, later expensive heels I knew would tear at her arches. But I said nothing. She excelled in school, went on to college for design. At first she claimed it was fashion marketing, but I knew deep down she loved shoes. She just could not love the way I made them, or the way I looked while making them. At her graduation, she invited me, but asked me not to wear anything handmade. I wore store-bought pumps that pinched my toes. I smiled in every photo. Later I learned she had told her classmates she was raised by a single father and aunts. She edited me out. I never asked her why. Maybe I did not want to hear the answer. Instead, I kept working, quietly. I took fewer commissions but continued repairing shoes for the old clients who still remembered me. I saved the money. I invested in a startup once, a young woman trying to make orthopedic shoes for elderly women. She reminded me of my daughter. Gentle, hungry for approval, full of design ideas but no funds. I never told my daughter about the investment. She never asked. Years passed, I grew older, my hands are stiffer, my daughter got married, I helped fund the down payment on their house. She did not invite me to speak at the reception, she sat me near the kitchen. Still, I made peace with it. I thought, perhaps my role now is silence. Maybe silence is what a mother becomes when her usefulness expires. But that changed the day I saw those green suede shoes, my final gift, thrown into the trash, mocked in front of strangers, and called peasant trash. That day something inside me cracked open. Not in anger, not in rage, but in quiet, crystal-clear resolve. You see, I may have glue-stained hands, but I also have a name on a patent. I may have a bent back, but I also have memory sharper than any blade. And I may no longer be invited to the dining room, but I still know how to build something from scraps. And I will, with or without her. It was a Tuesday when she told me they were moving in, her in-laws. I meant to give you more notice, she said casually over breakfast. But things moved quickly. Dad's parents sold their condo and, well, you know how the market is. I nodded slowly, stirring the oatmeal I had made, though I had no appetite left. Of course, I said. She exhaled in relief, like she expected me to argue. I never did. The next day I noticed my closet door was open. Inside, half of my clothing was already gone, moved to bins and stacked near the garage entrance. My books were boxed, and the framed photos of her childhood had vanished from my dresser. I touched the empty shelf where the photo of her in pigtails used to sit. The glass left a faint outline in the dust. Later that evening, I walked past the spare bedroom, my bedroom once, and saw new bedding being laid down. Fresh curtains, a heated mattress pad, an orchid on the nightstand. I paused at the door. She turned and looked at me, holding a decorative pillow in her arms. "Oh," she said flatly. "I was going to tell you. We're giving this room to Dad's parents. They're used to a more traditional setup. You understand, right?" I tried to smile. "Where should I go?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't hesitate. "The garage," she said. "It's already cleared out, still has power. You'll have your own space, quiet. People your age need peace and, less stimulation." The words felt like a diagnosis. Less stimulation. Less space. Less existence. I glanced over her shoulder to the bed I had slept in for the last 5 years. The corner of my quilt was still peeking from underneath the new comforter, hand-stitched, faded blue. She saw my eyes and added quickly, "We're making it nice. I ordered a portable heater. Besides, you're used to tighter quarters. The workshop you lived in was practically the same size." The workshop. She always spoke of it like a myth, like some cave where poor women baked bread and cursed their misfortune. It was where I built every pair of shoes she ever wore until she turned 13. She turned away before I could say anything else, fluffed a pillow, and muttered, "This is a new chapter, Mom. You can't cling to old rooms forever." A new chapter? What chapter was I in then? The footnote? The appendix? Later that night, I quietly moved my things, what little had not already been packed, to the garage. The space was cold, dusty, and smelled faintly of fertilizer. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, swinging slightly from the breeze that slipped in through the cracked door frame. There was a foldable cot and one of those plastic drawer organizers she probably bought from a clearance bin. My shoes were in a laundry basket. My clothes hung from a pipe with a string of twine. I sat down and looked around. So this was my room. A room with no windows, no air circulation, no memory. Just storage shelves, gardening tools, and an elderly woman tucked in between the lawnmower and the recycling bin. I did not cry. I had spent too many nights in colder places. I had slept on workshop floors, hospital chairs, and in buses that took me home too late for dinner. But something inside me did ache, not from humiliation, but from recognition. They had written me out of the story. Not with cruelty, not with shouts or locked doors, but with calm, polished language that left no room for negotiation. It was as if I had been gently erased, sentence by sentence. That night I could not sleep. The heater made a ticking sound, and the insulation did little to muffle the voices upstairs. I could hear them laughing, talking about renovations. The wedding anniversary coming up. Her mother-in-law mentioned something about converting the garage into a wine cellar. I closed my eyes and pulled the blanket up to my chin. Around midnight, the door creaked open. It was my grandson. He was 8, still young enough to sneak out of bed, but old enough to know when something was wrong. He stepped into the garage in his socks, holding a flashlight like a secret. "Grandma?" he whispered. I sat up slowly. "What are you doing out of bed?" He looked around, confused. "Are you sleeping here now?" I smiled gently. "Just for a while. Grown-ups need space too, remember?" He nodded, but his eyes did not leave the cot. He shuffled closer, then asked the question I was afraid of. "Did Mommy tell you to?" I looked into his eyes, wide, honest, untouched by the performances adults put on. "Yes," I said softly. He climbed up beside me, sat cross-legged on the blanket. "It's cold," he murmured. "I know." He leaned against my arm, and we sat there in silence. He did not say much, but his presence said everything. After a while, he whispered, "I miss when you used to read to me in your room." "I'm still here," I said, "but it's different now." Yes, it was. He stayed with me until his mother's footsteps echoed down the stairs, calling his name. He ran back without saying goodbye. The next morning I found a small folded note under my pillow. It was written in shaky third-grade print. "I love you more than the whole house." That night, I cried. Not for myself, not for the cot or the cold or the shame, but for the day I knew would come, when even this child would be taught to make room for something shinier than love. And that is when I began to think, not about revenge, not yet, but about worth, about what it meant to have it taken, and how, sometimes, you have to take it back without asking. It started with the sound of laughter, not the soft, honest kind that comes from surprise or joy. No, this was the clipped kind, sharp, rehearsed, rising in rhythm with clinking glasses and shallow compliments. It floated down the staircase and seeped through the crack beneath the garage door, reaching even the cold concrete where I lay. I heard footsteps, high heels clicking across the tile floor. Music played upstairs, some trendy jazz fusion mix, the kind that is meant to sound expensive. I pulled my shawl tighter around my shoulders and sat up slowly on the edge of the cot. Another round of laughter erupted, and then applause. I stood and opened the door to the garage, careful not to let it creak too loudly. I poked my head into the hallway. Balloons, streamers, a smell of baked brie and champagne. I saw slivers of pastel pink decorations and gold foil letters peeking from the stairwell. Something about Fabulous 40 shimmered near the ceiling. I took a tentative step forward. It had to be her birthday, of course. I had not been told anything, not directly, but I recognized the signs. I followed the scent of the food toward the kitchen, where the catering trays were laid out in neat, symmetrical rows. Fancy sandwiches, imported cheeses, little cups of gazpacho with edible flowers floating on top. I spotted Marina, the housekeeper, a sweet girl, young, polite, always addressing me as ma'am, even when others did not. She looked up in surprise when she saw me. "Oh, Mrs. Grace," I smiled gently. "Busy day, huh?" "Looks like a lot of people are visiting," she hesitated. I could see the conflict in her eyes, one part fear, one part apology. Then she said softly, "They didn't tell you." I kept smiling. "Tell me what?" She lowered her voice and glanced toward the stairs. "Ms. Rachel asked that you not come upstairs during the event. She said she wanted to keep things streamlined." Streamlined? I had been streamlined out of my daughter's birthday. I stood still, trying to process the humiliation quietly with dignity. "I see," I said. I'm so sorry, ma'am," she whispered. "I think she just didn't want questions about family. You know how people talk." Yes, I knew. I looked down at my slippers, the ones I had stitched myself last spring. Worn thin now, the soles slightly frayed. Suddenly I felt conscious of them, as if they betrayed something about me, something too real, too raw for the polished company upstairs. Marina reached out as if to say something else, but I shook my head gently. "It's all right, dear. Thank you for your honesty." I turned back toward the garage, slower this time, my breath heavy but even. I sat on the edge of the cot and stared at the ceiling, listening. I heard them sing Happy Birthday in a chorus. I heard champagne corks pop. I heard Rachel's voice squeal with performative surprise as someone handed her a gift. At one point someone shouted, "To the woman who built her empire from scratch." The room erupted in cheers, and I sat in the dark. I thought about the empire I had built too, one made of cloth, leather, and calloused fingers, one that lived in her feet before it lived in her house. But mine did not come with parties or speeches. Mine came with silence. And sometimes silence is the deepest form of betrayal. I heard a woman say, "Your mom must be so proud." Rachel laughed, not missing a beat. "Oh, she's not really around much." I closed my eyes. That was it then. I was not dead, not missing, not in a nursing home, just not really around much. As if I had faded like wallpaper, present but ignorable. Later that night, when the party died down and the guests filtered out, I heard someone stumble into the kitchen for water. The ice maker clanked, a cabinet closed. Then silence again. I walked quietly out to the backyard. The lights were still glowing faintly across the lawn, twinkling like tiny lies. I wandered to the far side of the garden, where the wind was stronger and the music was just a faint echo. From there, I could see the second-story balcony, where Rachel was laughing with her friends, a wineglass in hand. She was beautiful, successful, beloved, and she had erased me, all without rage, just absence, a quiet, clean cut. I sat on the garden bench and stared up at the stars. The moon was hidden behind a cloud, but the sky was open. For a moment, I thought of my own 40th birthday, long ago, in a 2-bedroom apartment with no central heating. She had made me a card with macaroni glued to it and spelled my name wrong. I had still framed it. I had kept it for years until the glue dried and the macaroni crumbled. I had loved that card more than I loved any gift she would receive that night. It was then I realized I would not survive another birthday like this. Not hers, not mine, not as a ghost. So I made a decision. Not out of malice, but out of memory. I went back into the garage, opened the wooden box beneath my cot, and pulled out the file folder. The patent was still there. So were the checks I had received from the young woman I had once invested in, my apprentice, my student, now quietly thriving on the other side of town. And at the bottom of the folder, untouched for over 2 decades, was the document I had kept hidden even from myself, my ownership papers. Not of a house, but of a process, a design, a name. The name she had borrowed without credit, without gratitude, and without understanding its value. I placed all the documents on the cot in front of me, and I smiled, not bitterly, not sadly, just finally, because silence had given them space to erase me, but paper would bring me back. I woke before dawn the next morning. The garage, the place I now called my room, was empty and cold. The cot was neatly folded, the plastic drawers gone. Even the faint scent of mowed grass was gone. In its place, nothing. No note, no sign of any disturbance. Just the emptiness of true absence. I stepped inside the house, through the slightly cracked door near the stairs. The floors were pristine. The house was silent. I climbed the stairs and walked through each room, calling softly, "Rachel?" Silence. Not a footstep. Not a mom. Nothing. I returned to the garage and sat down on the step. I waited, and waited, and waited, but no one came. At noon I heard voices upstairs, laughter, conversation. They didn't ask for me. They didn't notice I was gone. At 3 I imagined someone might come looking, maybe ask where's Mom, maybe stick their head down here. No one did. Evening came. She ordered sushi for dinner. I could hear them chewing and clicking chopsticks, recounting stories, and finally lights went out. Just another night without me. I lay down on the cold concrete and closed my eyes. Days passed. No phone call. No message. No police asking if I needed help. I was already not there. 9 days later, when I had forgotten what warmth felt like, there was a knock on the garage door. Slow, polite. I opened it. There stood a man in a suit, late 30s, warm eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Hello, are you Mrs. Grace?" His voice was careful, respectful. "Yes," I said softly, "I am." He looked down at a thick envelope in his hand. "My name is Michael Rosenthal. I'm a lawyer. I was asked to deliver some documents to you." My chest tightened. "One of them is a formal notice revoking your guarantee on the bank loan for the house." I did not blink. "And another," he said, holding a second folder, addresses a patent that you hold, currently being used by a company. A cease and desist is included." He paused. "I'm sorry," he said, "and this has already been forwarded to a human rights organization, along with recorded statements and testimonial evidence regarding defamatory remarks made against elderly persons." Defamatory remarks. I nodded without speaking. He handed me each folder: bank paperwork, patent documents, recordings, letters to human rights lawyers. He cleared his throat. "If there's anything more you need, clarity, anything, my card is enclosed. I'll step back now." He gave me one last gentle nod and closed the door quietly behind him. I stood there alone, holding the documents against my chest. I sat back on the garage step. The envelopes felt heavy, like history. I thought of the bank, how I had unknowingly guaranteed the mortgage when I helped her so many years ago. If the house was at stake, they could come after me. But now, I had clawed that away. I thought of the patent, my design, my work, the leather-stilted, the hand-sewn soul that would have been sold under her brand, credited to her name. Now it was mine, and she was the one in trouble. I thought of those hateful words she'd spit out, calling my creations trash, my presence irrelevant. Those words were now in the hands of people who believed in dignity, not just power. I closed my eyes and let the weight settle. They had thought silence would erase me. They were wrong. I stood up. The garage had changed. It wasn't just a room. It was a statement. Paperwork in one arm. The room is cool against my skin. I walked inside the house, for the first time in days, this time with something more than quiet, with purpose. I passed the living room. The empty chair she had cleared for me was gone. I glanced at the staircase. Each step I climbed felt lighter. I emerged into the kitchen where she was standing, alone, cleaning a plate. She turned. There was no surprise in her eyes, just an unreadable calm. I held up the envelope with the words, "Patent, cease and desist, human rights." She swallowed. I did not say a word. Then I walked out, carrying nothing else but the documents and the quiet knowledge that I had taken one step back into the world, and I would not be erased again. It did not take long. The lawyer had warned me gently, once it's out there, there's no pulling it back. I nodded. I had lived my entire life being pulled back, by obligation, by silence, by the weight of family. This time I let it all go. It began with a headline. Small, discreet. Tucked into the local business section. Family-owned footwear brand accused of intellectual property theft. I knew her company well. It had her initials woven into the logo. She claimed to represent modern elegance with a vintage soul. But that soul, it turned out, belonged to me. I never intended to ruin her. But I also never imagined she would turn my work into a lie. The cease and desist hit her inbox on a Thursday. By Friday, 3 wholesale accounts had pulled their orders. Over the weekend, the lawsuit details made their way into fashion industry forums. By Monday, it hit the press, and then it hit the internet. The patent violation was bad. The loss of trust from vendors was worse. But nothing compared to what came next. One of the clips, the one from her birthday, where I had stood in the kitchen like a ghost, had been recorded by a guest. The one where she laughed, drink in hand, and said, "My mom? Oh, she's not really around much. She's more like the past you can't quite throw out." Then another clip surfaced. Her voice is sharper, colder. "Shoes? From her? I don't wear peasant trash. She smells like glue and regret." It was a train with no brakes. The internet has a way of boiling everything down to a single damning frame. That was hers. Frozen, mid-laugh, wineglass raised, while the subtitle read, "Peasant Trash." The backlash was immediate. Customers began tagging the company in angry comments. "Respect your mothers" started trending. Influencers dropped her brand like hot coals. Former employees came forward anonymously, sharing stories of belittlement, ageism, and fake origin myths. One person posted a side-by-side, my original design from the 1996 patent next to a screenshot from her latest catalog. The match was exact. She claimed it was a coincidence. The courts said otherwise. By week's end, 3 investors had publicly pulled out. A major retail chain canceled their holiday contract. A statement was released, bland and desperate. We are reviewing the matter seriously and will be conducting an internal investigation. I watched it all unfold from a friend's guest room, an old client of mine who had once been a nurse and now ran a nonprofit. She brewed tea like medicine. She didn't ask questions. She simply handed me the remote each night and said, "If you want to watch." At first I didn't, but then I did. Not out of revenge, out of record. The world had forgotten me, so I let them remember. One morning I walked past a coffee shop and saw her face on the news, blurred, hunched, shielding her eyes from the camera. The caption beneath read, "Designer silent amidst elder abuse allegations and patent lawsuit." Elder abuse, a term I never thought would apply to me. But that was what it was, wasn't it? Not with fists, not with bruises, with erasure, with exile, with silence. And now the silence was broken. She released a statement through her publicist, all fluff and fog. "This has been a difficult time for our family, and we ask for privacy as we address these deeply personal matters." But there was no privacy anymore. People began to recognize me. Strangers stopped me in the grocery store. Are you Grace?" I nodded, shyly. One woman hugged me so tightly I thought my ribs would crack. She said, "You reminded me of my grandmother." I let her die thinking she didn't matter. Another slipped a note into my cart. "You matter, you always did." The letters poured in, from other grandmothers, from daughters who now felt ashamed, from sons who had left voicemails that went unreturned. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was every story buried beneath birthday parties, behind locked garage doors, beneath the weight of a generation too tired to complain. And her dream? It collapsed, not because I tore it down, because it was never built on truth. I received a final message from her assistant, detached, clinical. "Due to ongoing litigation and the dissolution of assets, we are no longer pursuing licensing or sales under the Graceline brand. Rachel is on indefinite leave." That was it. A dream gone, a brand burned, a legacy erased. Just not mine. When the brand first appeared, I almost didn't recognize it. The font was soft, serifed, and worn like an old love letter. The logo was simple, a thread weaving through the outline of a shoe, shaped subtly like a heart, and beneath it, in quiet elegance, Grace's soul. At first I thought it was a coincidence, the name, the theme, the focus on women over 35, but then I saw her. On screen, hair darker now, eyes sharper, confidence steady, but I'd know that face anywhere. Jenna. The girl I once found crying behind a dumpster with a broken sandal and a rejection letter from the fashion school that said, "We do not offer scholarships to applicants with insufficient creative lineage." She had wiped her tears, clutching her grandmother's hand-sewn purse, and told me, "They said my work looks too domestic." I had invited her into my studio, taught her how to double-stitch a sole, how to heat leather without warping, how to trace feet like reading history. Now she stood in front of a live audience, a single spotlight casting her in gold, a sea of journalists and influencers watching from folding chairs and TikTok tripods. Behind her, the showroom glowed with the warm scent of aged leather and lavender oil. Shoes lined the shelves, not flashy, not branded with celebrity initials, but real, honest, built for women who had run through life and earned their comfort. Jenna looked into the camera and smiled. "I didn't build this to sell shoes," she said. "I built it to repay a woman who showed me that dignity can live in calluses, that kindness doesn't need applause." The room went quiet. She took a breath, then said clearly, "I'm not selling footwear. I'm selling gratitude." There was a beat of silence, then applause. The camera panned to the crowd, where women wiped their eyes. Some nodded, some clapped slowly, as if remembering something they hadn't thought about in years, a mother, a grandmother, a stranger who had stitched more than fabric. And somewhere in another city, in a smaller apartment, my daughter was watching. She wouldn't admit it, but I knew. She had always followed the market. She would have seen the headline. From basement to boardroom, how a shoe brand for women over 35 took over the industry overnight. She would have clicked the live stream. She would have seen Jenna speak, and she would have heard the brand name repeated over and over again. Grace's soul. Not Rachel's. Not modern legacy. Grace. Mine. I heard from a friend that she was crying when it happened. Alone. No husband in sight. Her phone flooded with texts she didn't answer. Not one investor reached out. Not one fashion house called. Because the world had moved on, and it hadn't followed her. It followed gratitude. Later that week, a delivery arrived at my door. A cream-colored box, wrapped in ribbon, with a handwritten note inside. For my first teacher. For every stitch. Love always, J. Inside the box, a pair of handmade shoes. Softest calf leather. Arch support crafted for age, not against it. The soles were stamped with a small signature, for the woman whose hands shaped mine. I wept for a long time, not because of revenge, but because I was finally remembered. Not just as someone's mother, but as someone. I never wanted a mansion, not even after the checks cleared, after the media stories passed, after the lawyers folded their briefcases and said, "Congratulations, you've won." No. What I wanted was smaller, quieter, something with wooden floors and windows that opened without groaning, something where the scent of glue and thread didn't mean poverty, but purpose. So I found a workshop. Not big, just enough space for 10 chairs, 2 long tables and a wall of shelves where leather could breathe. The kind of space that had memory in its bones. And I filled it, not with workers, with women. Women like me. Women whose children forgot them. Women whose grandchildren never knew them. Women who once held everything together, until the world decided they had nothing left to hold. They came in slowly at first, hesitant, fragile. Some still carried the tremble of having been called a burden. Others, the quiet sadness of a holiday alone. But I taught them the same way I had taught Jenna, how to double knot a thread, how to feel for balance beneath the sole, how to sew in silence and let the sound of the needle do the talking. And we made shoes. Not fast, not flashy. Each pair took days. Every stitch was deliberate, every seam pressed with care. On the inside of each finished pair, just below the arch, we etched the same line. Made by hands once denied the right to hold their own children. The shoes sold out every time, not because they were perfect, but because they had souls, and more than that, because they had a name. Not a designer's name, not a celebrity's signature, but Grace, and not just mine, theirs. Grace became a story, not a person, and I was finally content to be part of it. Not the star, not the victim, just the beginning. One afternoon, the doorbell rang. I was fixing a buckle. Marcia, 82, former librarian, part blind in one eye, but still threading better than most, went to answer. She returned, whispering, "It's a man in a tie. He's looking for you." He was from a local tech startup. Young, eager. He had visited the pop-up exhibit we hosted last fall. Bought a pair for his wife. He told me, smiling, that his company was growing fast, that they wanted to hire someone in brand strategy. "They're interviewing someone named Rachel," he said casually. "Her resume's good, real polished." Then he paused. "Before we go further, do you know her? She listed your last name, Grace." I met his eyes. "I know her," I said. He nodded, not asking more. "But I'll say this," I added gently. "This place, it's built on a kind of truth most resumes don't hold." He smiled. Later, I found out the rest, from a friend who worked the front desk. Rachel had shown up in heels too high for the gravel path. Her makeup was perfect. Her answers are sharp. But when the founder, who wore shoes my hands had trained someone else to make, asked, "Do you have any connection to Grace?" She paused, looked down, and said nothing. There was no place for her there, not because she was my daughter, but because she had spent her life pretending I wasn't her mother. You see, sometimes the final door doesn't slam. It just never opens. Years passed. The workshop kept going. We made fewer shoes, but better ones. We started printing names inside, first names only. Dolores, Naomi, Etta, stories in every pair. And one day, I made a pair for myself. Not to wear, to remember. Dark brown leather, hand-tooled, no polish, just honesty. On the inside I wrote, "Grace, for the last step I'll ever take." And I placed them in a glass box. Not because I was bitter, because I had built something, quietly, patiently, with the same hands once mocked for being dirty, hands that had been denied, dismissed, demoted, Hands that remembered every insult, but still chose to build. One stitch at a time, and that, my dear, is how a woman like me, forgotten in a garage, written out of birthdays and boardrooms, became the name stitched into the soul of a new legacy, not with shouting, not with fury, but with truth and time. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of someone who was once cast aside, someone who deserved better, then don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button to follow Grandma True Stories, where the quietest women in the room finally speak. Because revenge has no expiration date. And wisdom remembers everything.